It was raining the night Daniel Hayes lost everything, though not in the way you'd expect a billionaire to fall. The sky wept in torrents over Manhattan, as if mourning something only it understood. Inside the penthouse, the only sound was the echo of Italian shoes grinding glass into marble. Daniel stood frozen at the threshold of his bedroom, blinking against a scene so vile, so intimate, that even his breath refused to come. Naomi, his wife, her laughter, once his salvation, now tangled in moans with the man who had once sworn loyalty to him. He didn't speak, didn't shout. That wasn't Daniel's way. Boardrooms had taught him that the loudest man is often the weakest. But this silence, it was different, weaponized, chilling. Naomi's eyes widened as if caught in a dream unraveling, yet her voice carried none of the expected guilt. "Daniel, this isn't what it looks like." He didn't flinch. He merely tilted his head, studied her like an investor reviews a crumbling asset, and then turned to the man beside her, his co-founder, his oldest friend, Marcus. "You can keep the watch," Daniel said flatly as Marcus scrambled to grab it from the nightstand. His words were cold, precise, final. He pivoted and walked away, the sound of glass underfoot crunching like bones in his wake. Naomi followed, him barely covered in silk and shame, stammering excuses that dissolved into the air like mist. He said nothing. Not then. Not until the elevator doors closed and the floor numbers blinked downward in silence. He didn't go to a hotel. Not even to the Midtown Tower, where his company, Solis Ventures, ran most of its empire. Instead, he disappeared into his ghost apartment, an empty shell of stone and chrome on the East River, a place meant for thinking, not living. There, he poured a glass of Japanese whiskey and stared at his reflection in the window. He expected rage, tears maybe. Instead, what stared back at him was something far colder, the quiet calculation of a man robbed not just of love, but of narrative control. Naomi's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was strategic. The timing, the man, even the location, it meant this wasn't a mistake. It was a message. Daniel understood messages. He built an empire by deciphering them, but this was different, because it didn't ask him to retaliate. It demanded he evolve. He spent the night replaying every moment of their last 3 years, every dinner, every gala, every time Naomi had touched his hand and looked away too soon. It had always been there, he just hadn't seen it. The tabloids erupted by morning. Solis CEO's marriage implodes amid cheating scandal. Daniel didn't issue a statement. He didn't need to. The media spun theories. His team whispered speculation, but none dared confront him directly. He walked into Solis that morning with the same posture he always had, unshakable. But something in his eyes had shifted. The calm had deepened, and with it, a storm began to churn. He wasn't interested in revenge for revenge's sake. That was beneath him. But power, control, those had been stolen, and Daniel Hayes didn't believe in forgiveness without consequence. Naomi had always craved attention, so she'd get it, but not on her terms. She'd learned the cost of orchestrating betrayal inside a man who believed in long games and silent detonations. But to reset the narrative, he needed something unexpected, a disruption, someone unpredictable. And then, somewhere between rage and strategy, a memory surfaced. Her, the woman from the shelter gala. The one who'd handed him a tissue when his migraine almost ruined a keynote speech. She hadn't asked for a photo. She hadn't tried to. Network. She simply said, "Breathe, you're not your company." He hadn't thought of her since, but now she was the only thread that felt unscripted. He summoned his assistant. "I want her name. The woman at the Linwood Gala. 2 months ago. Check the staff list. Cross-reference photos." The assistant blinked. "Sir?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. Do I sound like I'm requesting permission? Within hours, the name arrived. Hannah Brooks, 28, temp event worker, no. Social footprint, no scandals. A single arrest for trespassing in a public park years ago. Charges dropped. Daniel read every line like scripture. It wasn't her beauty that caught him. It was her invisibility. Her existence had slipped through. The filters of fame and business, and that made her perfect, untouched by his world, a variable even Naomi wouldn't see coming. Daniel picked up the phone. Bring her to my office, he said. Today, no media, no names, just her. When Hannah walked in, she didn't look up. Her posture was that of someone used to waiting rooms and rejection. She wore her thrifted, blazer-like armor, but Daniel didn't speak immediately. He observed her like a chess player evaluates a piece he never knew could check a king. Then he said, I need your help. She looked confused. You... what? He smiled. Help me reset everything. Hannah took a beat, then another. Are you hiring? She asked cautiously. Not exactly. He stood, walked to the window. I need a fiancé. The silence shattered whatever expectations she'd had. Excuse me? Daniel turned to face her. You'll pretend. Just long enough for the media to forget Naomi, long enough for me to regain control. She stared at him like he was mad. Maybe he was. And why would I say yes? She finally asked. He nodded, approving her directness. Because I'll pay you more than you've ever dreamed of, and because I suspect you're tired of being ignored by the world. Hannah folded her arms. And what happens after you're done with me? Daniel's eyes didn't waver. Then you go back or forward. That part's your call. She left without answering. But Daniel knew people. He knew what it meant when someone didn't say no, even when they should. That night, he stared at her file again, and for the first time in months he felt anticipation, not just for revenge, for possibility. The kind that only comes when the past has burned so completely, the future has no choice but to emerge from ash. The next morning, Hannah Brooks stood in front of her cracked mirror, brushing her teeth with trembling fingers. Her phone buzzed. On the counter, 3 missed calls from unknown numbers. She hadn't slept, not because of fear exactly, but because her mind refused to settle. Billionaires didn't offer fake engagements to strangers, not unless they needed something even, darker than a PR fix. And that was the part that haunted her, the way he said, I need your help, like it wasn't a request, but an omen. Her apartment, a small third-floor walk-up in the Bronx, smelled faintly of rain and old paperbacks. The ceiling leaked. Her landlord ignored repairs, and the walls were thin enough to hear every domestic war next door. She used to dream of escape, not luxury, just silence, just a place where her name didn't have to be repeated twice for someone to remember it. But now her name sat in Daniel Hayes's private file, and she wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a trap. At exactly 8 a.m., a black car pulled up outside her building. The driver didn't speak, just nodded. The ride to Solis Ventures, HQ, was silent, surreal. Skyscrapers blurred like illusions. She was taken through a side entrance, no badge, no protocol, then a quiet elevator ride to the top floor, where the air itself smelled different, clean, pressurized, like money. When the doors opened, Daniel was waiting, his back to the skyline, hands folded behind him like a general awaiting a report. You came, he said without turning. Hannah stepped inside, still not sure why. He turned to face her, and, for a moment, the silence stretched between them like static. Then he walked to his desk, picked up a leather folder, and handed it to her. Inside, a non-disclosure agreement, a 6-week timeline, and a payout that made her knees threaten to buckle. This is real? She asked. It's more real than anything either of us is pretending right now. Daniel replied. She skimmed. The contract. 6 weeks, 2 public appearances per week, 1 major event, private rehearsals, shared housing for plausibility. She raised an eyebrow. You think people won't notice I still wear thrift store shoes? He offered the faintest smile. That's why I hired help. Right on cue, the door opened, and in walked someone who looked like she ran a luxury empire from her phone. Clara Morgan, the woman said. Your transformation begins now. The hours blurred. Hannah was measured, photographed, styled, analyzed. She met with voice coaches, etiquette tutors, a personal historian who crafted a believable backstory. You're a consultant, Clara said. Sustainability strategist. European schooling. Very chic. Hannah resisted. What if someone actually checks? Clara didn't blink. No one checks a good performance. They only scrutinize a bad one. By nightfall, Hannah was draped in cream silk, staring at her reflection in a penthouse dressing room. She didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. Meanwhile, Daniel fielded calls. Naomi's team had started leaking statements, half-truths, suggestions of emotional neglect, rumors of affairs. He needed the story to flip, fast, and Hannah was the pivot. At 9:13 p.m., a reporter caught Daniel exiting Solis. Seconds later, Hannah, leaving through a service exit, stepped into the same frame. A click, a flash, a tabloid headline before midnight. Mystery woman spotted with billionaire Daniel Hayes. The storm had begun. Hannah saw the photo the next morning. She was blinking, caught mid-step, while Daniel leaned slightly toward her, as if shielding her. She hadn't noticed that in the moment. Now it looked intimate, almost staged. Her phone exploded. Old classmates, her estranged brother, strangers with opinions. One message said, "Marry rich, huh? Just like Mom." She turned her phone off and left it on her dresser. She didn't cry. But she did feel something deeper than fear. Exposure. Daniel called that night. "You all right?" he asked. She hesitated. "You think it's easy being a weapon?" There was silence on the line. Then he said, "Vultures only circle what has value." She didn't answer. "Hannah," he added, "I meant it. 6 weeks. Then you walk away with your payout, your name cleared, and no more thrift store shoes unless you choose them." She smiled faintly. "You're still assuming I won't ruin you before this is over." The following day, Daniel arrived at her apartment unannounced. No security, no fanfare. Just him, in a hoodie and jeans, holding coffee. "Come with me," he said. "You need to see the battlefield." She followed him into a sleek SUV that whisked them across town to an empty rooftop venue being prepped for a tech gala. "Next week," he said, "we step onto this stage." Hannah stared at the glittering skyline. "You sure you want me as your prop?" He looked at her, sharp and soft at once. "I think you might be sharper than I realized." That night, she stood alone on that rooftop long after he'd gone. She thought about her mother, about every job she'd worked where no one remembered her name, about how one lie had brought her to this edge, and how another might let her finally climb out. But she didn't yet realize the price of that climb. Not the spotlight, not the shame, not even the betrayal waiting in the wings. The real cost. The risk of no longer knowing who she was when the curtain finally closed. The gala arrived faster than Hannah expected. For a week, she had been swallowed by a whirlwind of rehearsals, media strategy sessions, and posture correction classes. Clara watched her like a sculptor scrutinizing marble. "Don't smile with all your teeth," she warned. "It reads desperate. And don't wave unless you're being waved at first. You're not a child." Hannah nodded, biting her tongue. She had been many things in her life: waitress, temp worker, retail clerk, but never a statue built for optics. Daniel, on the other hand, remained calm, chillingly so. He met with investors, posed for a few pre-leak photos, and rehearsed their first public kiss with clinical precision. "People will watch our mouths," he said. "If you look like you're bracing for it, they'll smell the lie." Hannah replied dryly, "So do I close my eyes and pretend it's real, or do I stare dead ahead and hope for the best?" He didn't smile. "You make them believe it's better than real." When the night finally came, Hannah stepped out of the black car in a dress that hugged her like memory. Midnight blue, backless, elegant. Her hair swept into a style that screamed wealth without trying too hard. Paparazzi swarmed the red carpet like a tidal wave, and Daniel, he met her halfway up the steps, offered his arm and whispered, "Whatever happens, don't blink." She gripped his forearm. "If I go down in these heels, I'm taking you with me." Cameras exploded, questions flew. "Is this your new fiancé? Where's Naomi? Who is she?" Daniel didn't answer. He just led Hannah into the hall like she belonged to the building itself. Inside, the room glittered. Champagne towers, gold trim, violinists playing Bach. It was excess, sculpted to look like taste. But Hannah noticed more than decor. She noticed eyes watching, evaluating. And in the far corner, a pair of them colder than all the rest. Naomi, dressed in crimson, a glass of wine in hand, her smile tight as piano wire. She said nothing, but the way she sipped, slow and theatrical, was a declaration. Hannah met her eyes and refused to flinch. "She's beautiful," Hannah murmured to Daniel, "and venomous." Daniel didn't turn. "Ignore her." But Hannah knew Naomi wasn't here for a scene. She was here for the slow, strategic erosion of everything Daniel had rebuilt. Halfway through the evening, the MC tapped his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, a toast to innovation, resilience, and the power of partnership." Daniel stood, glass in hand. "This past year has tested all of us, but I've learned something valuable. Truth, like technology, evolves. And tonight, I'm proud to introduce the person who reminded me of that." He reached for Hannah's hand. "My fiancée, Hannah Brooks." The crowd gasped. Naomi didn't blink. It wasn't in the plan. The way Daniel's voice softened, the way his hand lingered on Hannah's waist, the way he looked at her like the fiction was cracking. And it wasn't in the plan when she looked back and didn't pull away. After the toast, the orchestra swelled. People moved to the dance floor. Daniel extended his hand. "One dance," he said. "For them?" she asked. "No," he replied. "This one's for me." They moved slowly, deliberately, like people stepping through a dream they weren't sure they wanted to wake from. Hannah felt her guard crumbling, not because of the dance, but because of the man holding her, because he was no longer playing a role, and neither was she. Afterward, back in the car, Daniel didn't speak. He just sat beside her in the dim light, breathing slower than usual. Finally, she asked, "You meant what you said?" He turned to her. Every word. She should have been happy, should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt exposed, because the closer this got to real, the more dangerous it became. And somewhere inside, a voice whispered, "Don't fall for a man who built his world on strategy. Don't become the next calculated casualty." Back in her apartment, she peeled off the gown, left her heels in the hallway, and stared at herself in the mirror. "This isn't who I am," she whispered. But the woman staring back, flawless, distant, mysterious, didn't blink, as if daring her to admit she wasn't pretending anymore. The next morning, her phone vibrated non-stop. Articles, reposts, memes. Her face now synonymous with Daniel's. One headline screamed, "From nobody to CEO's fiancée, who is Hannah Brooks?" She didn't answer, didn't respond, just stared. At the words, the one she couldn't get out of her head was, "nobody." At Solis, Daniel watched the reactions. Naomi's camp went silent. That worried him more than noise. Silence meant strategy. Silence meant she wasn't done. His assistant walked in with a white envelope, no sender, just her handwriting, Naomi's. Inside, a photo of Hannah leaving the gala, circled in red. Beneath it, "She's not who you think she is." But then again, neither are you. The envelope sat untouched on Daniel's desk for hours. He didn't open it again. He didn't need to. Naomi never wasted ink on empty threats. Her messages were always wrapped in double meanings, half-truths sharp enough to bleed. Daniel knew this wasn't about the photo. It was about control. She was testing his reaction, watching to see if he'd flinch. But this time he wouldn't. He couldn't afford to. He had underestimated how fast Hannah was becoming more than a pawn. She wasn't supposed to care. She wasn't supposed to be good at it. But at the gala, she didn't just hold her own. She captivated. And now the press was spinning their own stories. Is Daniel Hayes finally in love? Cinderella or CEO? He read the headlines with quiet dread. The narrative was slipping from his hands. Not in a bad way, but in a terrifying one, because for once he didn't want to control it. He just wanted her to stay. Meanwhile, Hannah sat across town in a rented hotel room. Daniel had offered the penthouse. She declined. "I need space," she said. He didn't push, but she didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother, sick, coughing blood in a free clinic, and heard her voice. Don't trust men who offer the world. They usually forget to mention the cost. And Daniel had offered her the world. Wrapped in power, dipped in danger, she scrolled through old emails, searched her own name, and there it was. Threads from years ago resurfacing like ghosts. Blogs, accusing her of scamming donors during her non-profit internship. One had posted her photo with the caption, "From activist to actress, what's real anymore?" She clenched her fists. That internship had nearly broken her. She hadn't scammed anyone. She'd exposed the fraud, only to be silenced with a non-disclosure and a ruined resume. The knock came at midnight. Hannah opened the door without thinking. Daniel stood there, rain-soaked, eyes dark. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "It's not safe for either of us." He stepped inside anyway. "Then let's be unsafe, just for tonight." She wanted to say no, but part of her, the part that didn't trust herself anymore, let the door close behind him. They didn't talk, not at first. He poured whiskey into chipped glasses, handed her one. They sat by the window, watching the city blur. "She sent me something," he said finally. "Naomi. A photo. A threat, maybe, or a warning." Hannah turned to him. "What did it say?" He hesitated. "That you're not who I think you are." She looked away. "And do you believe her?" Daniel didn't answer, but the silence said more than he intended. "I've made mistakes," Hannah said quietly. "Big ones, but I never lied to you. Not about the things that matter." He turned to her then. "I know." And in that moment, something shifted. The space between them, once transactional, became something else, something fragile, something real, and real, they both knew, was dangerous. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. His thumb brushed her knuckles like he was testing reality. "If this were real," he whispered, "would you still be here?" Her eyes met his. "I'm still here now, aren't I?" They didn't kiss. Not yet. But the silence between them was loud enough to drown everything else. The next day, the press doubled down. Rumors about Hannah's past surfaced in clusters, half true, all malicious. Naomi's fingerprints were all over them. Daniel called an emergency meeting with his PR team. "We control this now," he said. "No spin, no denial, just truth." His advisors panicked. "You can't just hand her the mic, it's risky." Daniel stared them down. "So is silence." That afternoon, Hannah posted a statement. It wasn't polished, it wasn't vetted, it was real. "Yes, I've struggled. Yes, I've worked jobs most people ignore. But if survival disqualifies you from success, then what does that say about the world we've built?" Within hours, the tone shifted. The trolls kept trolling, but the tide was turning. "Maybe she's the real deal," someone tweeted. Maybe we need more Hannahs. Naomi read the post alone in her Upper East Side apartment. Her wineglass trembled in her hand. She had expected silence, shame, collapse. Instead, Hannah was rising, not just in headlines, in truth. And truth was a harder opponent than spin. Later that night, Daniel found Hannah on the rooftop of Solis. She stood at the edge, hair dancing in the wind, eyes locked on the city. "You did it," he said. She didn't turn. "We did it." He stepped beside her. "No. That was all. You." She finally looked at him. "So what now?" Daniel didn't smile. "Now, we find out if this was ever just a performance." It was nearly midnight when Hannah stepped into the private elevator at Solis. She was alone, barefoot in heels she had abandoned hours ago, the dress she'd worn to a media dinner now wrinkled and clinging to her skin. Her mind felt like static. Too many voices, too many opinions, too many headlines. She leaned back against the wall, closed her eyes. The soft hum of the elevator was the first silence she'd had all day. Then a hand stopped the doors. Daniel stepped in without a word. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, his tie gone, eyes bloodshot. He looked at her like he had something to say, but didn't know how to begin. The doors slid shut, and for a moment they were trapped in a mirrored box that didn't care about scandals or strategies. Just two people too tired to lie. The elevator jerked, lights flickered, a mechanical groan echoed through the shaft, and then everything stopped. Power cut, silence thickened. Hannah opened her eyes. "You've got to be kidding me." Daniel pressed the emergency button. "Nothing. This has never happened before," he muttered. "Ironic," she replied, crossing her arms. "You built an empire on control, and now you're stuck in a box with no buttons." He ran a hand through his hair. "I hate elevators." She raised an eyebrow. "Claustrophobia?" "No," he said quietly. "No control." For a long moment they stood in silence, each locked in their own spiraling thoughts. Then Daniel sank to the floor with a sigh. "I spent 10 years making sure I never ended up trapped again." Hannah watched him. "And yet here you are, with me." She sat down across from him, knees tucked under her. "Tell me something," she said. "Did you ever actually love Naomi?" He didn't answer right away. "At first, yes. She was sharp, untouchable. But over time, she started calculating every moment, even her grief, even her kindness. It stopped being real." Hannah studied him. "And this?" she asked. "What we're doing? Is any of it real?" He looked at her then, really looked. No bravado, no script. At first, it was just damage control, a distraction. But now, I don't know. Her breath hitched slightly. He wasn't performing. Not this time. "I told myself I wouldn't. I fall for anyone who sees me as leverage," she whispered. "And here I am, sitting in a box with a man who bought my silence." "I didn't buy you," he said. "I gave you a way out. And if I don't want out anymore?" The question lingered between them like a dare. Daniel leaned back against the wall, closed his eyes. "Then we need a new rule." She tilted her head. "What kind of rule?" He opened his eyes. "While we're in here, no lies, no roles, just the truth." She considered it. "Even if it hurts? Especially then?" They sat in that strange, suspended place, physically and emotionally, each testing the edges of their confessions. "I used to dream about being seen," Hannah said. "Not famous, just seen, noticed. I thought money would solve that. But all it's done is put a spotlight on things I was never proud of." "I envy that," Daniel said. "The ability to start over without burning a city down first." Hannah smirked. "You burn things quietly, elegantly. But they still burn." He didn't deny it. I thought if I could control everything, I'd never get hurt again. And how's that working out for you? She asked gently. He laughed. Not a sound of amusement, but surrender. The elevator lights flickered. Back to life. The floor indicator blinked. Slowly they began to descend. Neither moved, neither spoke, but something had shifted. When the doors opened, Hannah stepped out first. Daniel followed, his gaze lingering on her with something dangerously close to longing. That night, neither of them slept. Not because of fear, but because for the first time the performance was cracking and neither of them knew what to do with what lay beneath. Daniel sat in his penthouse, staring at the city below. Hannah stood by her hotel window, tracing the skyline with her fingertips, both repeating the same question. What happens when a lie stops feeling like a lie? The next morning, Daniel cancelled all his meetings. He asked Clara to book him a single lunch meeting. No investors, no photographers, just Hannah. When she arrived, she didn't wear designer. She wore herself, jeans, sweater, no makeup. And still, when she entered the room, Daniel looked up like she'd brought the sun with her. I've been thinking about the elevator, he said. Me too. That wasn't just silence, he added. That was clarity. She nodded. So what now? Daniel's voice was soft. Now we stop pretending we're pretending. Hannah's eyes didn't leave his. Then you need to know something. Her fingers curled against the table. I'm not just running from poverty, Daniel. I'm running from something I never told you. He didn't flinch. Then tell me. Her jaw clenched. Not here, not now, but soon. He nodded. We'll make space for it, even if we have to build it ourselves. And for the first time since the contract was signed, the room didn't feel like a stage. It felt like a beginning, a fragile, terrifying, necessary beginning. 2 days passed in calm, or the illusion of it. Hannah spent most of her time at Solis, attending strategic meetings, adjusting to her new media role as Daniel's partner, and dodging suspicious glances from staff. But underneath her calm face, the elevator pact echoed like a soft warning. No more lies. And the secret she had hinted at? It was waking up again, clawing its way to the surface, more dangerous than ever. Daniel noticed the shift. She was quieter now, not in the way that meant fear, but in the way someone closes drawers inside themselves. He didn't press. Not yet. He was dealing with a wave of internal memos, stockholders asking about Hannah, and a mysterious audit request, flagged from a financial firm in Prague. The memo was unsigned. The number was foreign. The implication, someone was digging into his past. That night, a new envelope arrived. No postage, just delivered silently to the front desk of Solis and, marked in handwritten cursive, private to Mr. Hayes only. Inside was a photo, grainy, black and white, of Hannah in a hoodie, leaving a warehouse in Brooklyn 3 years earlier. The image was time-stamped. The back of the photo simply read, Argus Pharma, missing records, subject X. Daniel's fingers tightened around the paper. He recognized the name. Argus Pharmaceuticals had been embroiled in a corruption case involving data suppression. Internal theft. He had read about it back then. The whistleblower had vanished. A secondary suspect, female, early 20s, had been cleared but never named. Could it be Hannah? He wanted to dismiss it, but the paper in his hand said otherwise. He didn't call her. Instead, he had Clara check the metadata. Don't tell anyone, he said, and dig deep, quietly. Clara gave a single nod. She knew better than to ask questions. That evening, Hannah knocked on his door. She looked tired. More than tired. Haunted. We need to talk, she said. He stepped aside without speaking. She sat on his sofa, curled her legs beneath her. I think it's time I told you what I didn't say in the elevator. He sat across from her, silent. She began slowly. 3 years ago, I worked for a non-profit that partnered with a pharmaceutical watchdog group. I was young, idealistic. They were investigating Argus. I handled files, took meeting notes, filed grant forms, basic stuff. But one day I saw something I shouldn't have. Trial records, side effect data that had been edited. I brought it to my supervisor. The next day the office was raided. Everyone disappeared. Daniel leaned forward. "What did you do?" "I ran," she said. "Not from guilt, from fear. My name was nowhere, but someone knew. I started getting emails, messages from someone called X. They knew I had seen the files. They wanted me to testify. I didn't. I was afraid." Her voice cracked. "I still am." Daniel studied her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to lose what I have now. You, this." "You thought I'd walk away?" She nodded. He stood slowly, walked to the fireplace, and placed the photo on the mantel. "Someone already knows," he said. "They sent me this." Her breath stopped. "Who?" "I don't know," he said. "But I intend to find out." For the first time in their complicated arrangement, Hannah saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of exposure, but fear of losing something real. She walked over, stood beside him. "You still want me in this?" she asked. "Even now?" He turned to her, touched her face. "Especially now." The room was silent. Then the fire crackled, soft, warm, steady, like a heartbeat refusing to surrender. The next day, Daniel ordered a full security audit. Hannah changed her number. Clara doubled encryption protocols. The ghost of Argus was real now, and they couldn't afford cracks. Meanwhile, Daniel's legal team unearthed a link. The file was stored under a sealed case in a European database owned by Naomi. The trail led to Prague, and the implication was clear. Naomi had been holding on to this the entire time, waiting. Naomi's message was not just personal, it was strategic. She wasn't just trying to hurt them, she was preparing to take everything, and somewhere, watching quietly, another figure was preparing to step into the chaos. A man in shadow, a forgotten name, one who had more reason than anyone to bring Daniel Hayes down. But he wouldn't strike yet, not until they were sure. Not until the love story was deep enough to be used against them. The file from Prague didn't just contain Hannah's ghost. Buried deep in the encrypted documents Daniel received from his European investigator was another name, one that hadn't crossed his mind in years: Nathaniel Hayes. It appeared casually as part of an inheritance memo written by Daniel's late father, an addendum to the will, sealed, then quickly rescinded. But there it was. "To my other son, Nathaniel. Should he come forward with claim?" Daniel stared at the name like it was a hallucination. His father had been cold, calculating, ruthless but never careless. If there was another heir, hidden and disinherited, then someone had been lying for a very long time. He dialed Clara immediately. "I need confirmation," he said. "Search all records for Nathaniel Hayes, born in London between 1985 and 1990. Clara's pause was barely noticeable. "You think he's alive?" "I think he's watching." Meanwhile, Hannah was trying to keep her head above water. The media had calmed, but barely. Her statement had turned some critics into sympathizers, but others dug deeper. A podcast episode dissected her every known job. A Twitter thread claimed she had been coached from the start, and through it all she felt Daniel slipping. Quiet, distracted, distant. She assumed it was Naomi, but it wasn't. It was blood. 3 days later, Daniel received a package. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, legal, notarized, bearing the insignia of a British firm. The header: "Petition to contest the Hayes estate, filed by Nathaniel Hayes." Attached was a passport photo. The face was unmistakable, eyes like Daniel's, jaw like their father's, a phantom come to claim the empire. That night, Daniel didn't speak. He sat in his office, staring at the photo until the sun bled into the glass. Hannah entered quietly, holding coffee. "You haven't slept," she said. He didn't look up. "There's someone else, another Hayes. My father had a child no one knew about, and now he's coming for what I built." She lowered the cup, slowly. "How much does he want?" 40% of Solis." She blinked. "He can't win, right?" Daniel finally looked at her. "He doesn't have to. He just has to shake the narrative, make the board nervous, make me look unstable." Hannah sat beside him. "Do you think Naomi's behind this?" "Maybe. Or maybe she's just glad. Someone else is taking the knife." He stood and began pacing. "This isn't a scandal. It's a siege." That same night, a message arrived for Hannah. Not an email. A voicemail from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was calm, deliberate, British. "You don't know me, Miss Brooks, but I know you. And I know what it's like to be used. Daniel Hayes is not who you think, but you already know that. What you don't know is what he's capable of. When it's over, remember, I tried to warn you." She played it 3 times, then sat in the dark. She didn't tell Daniel. Not immediately, because part of her, a small, sharp part, wanted to hear what Nathaniel had to say, wanted to know if Daniel was hiding more, because secrets were stacking like cards, and she wasn't sure how much more the foundation could hold. At Solis, the board met in private. Whispers, concerns. Daniel wasn't losing control, but the edges were cracking. Investors needed reassurance. And Naomi, she remained silent. No public comment, no denial, no attack. That silence was her masterpiece. And in it, she orchestrated the perfect question. If Daniel Hayes was never the only heir, did he ever deserve the throne? The next day, Hannah received a letter at her hotel. Handwritten, crisp, no signature, but the script was eerily familiar. Inside, "If you want the truth, meet me. 1 hour, no cameras, no Daniel." An address followed. She stared at the page, heart pounding. She knew this was a line, and once crossed, there'd be no pretending. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. Not Clara, not security, not Daniel. She slipped into the back of a cab and rode in silence to the address. It was a rooftop bar, closed for renovations. But someone was waiting. A man, early 30s. Sharp suit, familiar posture. He turned as she approached. "Miss Brooks," he said, "I've been looking forward to this." Nathaniel Hayes extended his hand. She didn't take it. "Start talking," she said. He smiled. "Very well. Let's talk about the empire your fiancé stole and the people he crushed along the way." And for the first time since the lie began, Hannah realized just how real the danger had become. The man before her wasn't what Hannah expected. Nathaniel Hayes didn't sneer, didn't gloat. His tone was calm, his words measured, his presence oddly comforting. "I'm not here to seduce you," he said, sipping black coffee from a paper cup. "I'm here to give you something Daniel never will. Context." Hannah remained standing. "Why me?" He looked up. "Because I know what it's like to be a prop in someone else's war." They sat at a corner table, surrounded by dusty bar stools and unopened crates of champagne. The city buzzed below, unaware of the quiet explosion brewing. "I didn't come for money," Nathaniel began. "I came because I was erased. My mother raised me alone in London. Our father sent checks until I turned 15. Then one day they stopped. No explanation, no more contact. When he died, I learned from a news article, not even a mention in the will." His voice was flat, but his hands shook. Hannah listened, uncertain. "That's tragic," she said. "But why go public now?" Nathaniel smiled faintly. "Because Daniel knew. He was sent to me once, when we were both teenagers. He shook my hand, promised to handle it. A month later, my mother was forced to sign a gag order in exchange for a final settlement. You see, Miss Brooks, this wasn't just an oversight. It was an execution. I was erased. She looked away. Daniel told me nothing about that. Nathaniel leaned in. Because Daniel doesn't believe in loose ends. He doesn't believe in weakness. He believes in image. And you, right now, are his strongest image. You think I'm being used. I think you were, but now you're something else, his liability. The more real this becomes, the more dangerous you are to him. And he knows it. Hannah swallowed hard. You have proof of any of this? Nathaniel reached into his coat and slid a file across the table. Inside, photos, financial transfers, notes from solicitors, letters with their father's signature. You don't have to trust me, he said. Just don't blindly trust him. He stood. This isn't about winning, it's about reckoning. You deserve the truth, so does the world. He left without another word. She sat there long after he was gone. The city was dimming. Streetlights flickered like faulty memories. She held the folder tightly against her chest, but her mind was louder than her heartbeat. If Daniel really erased his brother, what else was he capable of burying? She returned to her hotel quietly, skipped dinner, turned off her phone. She didn't know what she believed, but she knew she couldn't go back to pretending nothing had changed. Meanwhile, Daniel was unraveling. Clara had informed him of Hannah's unexplained absence. She turned off her GPS, Clara said. Left alone, no detail. He said nothing, but his silence was volcanic. That night he waited in the penthouse, staring at the door. When it opened, he stood too fast. Where were you? She held up the file. With your brother. The words landed like stone. You shouldn't have gone, he said. I needed to, she replied, because he's not just a ghost, he's real, and his story sounds very different from yours. Daniel's jaw tensed. He's bitter. He was paid off. He was erased, Hannah snapped. Just like the woman from Argus, just like anyone who doesn't fit your narrative. Silence exploded between them. Then Daniel spoke, low and quiet. I did what I had to. My father's empire was bleeding. If I hadn't taken control, Solus would have collapsed. And Nathaniel was a complication, a messy one. Hannah shook her head. He was your brother. He still is, Daniel said, but I won't let him rewrite my life out of guilt. She turned to leave. He reached for her hand. Hannah, don't let him twist this. You don't know what he's capable of. She pulled away. And you don't know what I'm becoming. The door closed behind her with a sound that felt final. Daniel stood there, stunned, hand still hanging in the air, wondering if the truth had finally cost him the only thing that felt real. Back in her room, Hannah opened the folder again. She looked at the documents with a new lens, not of suspicion, but sorrow. These weren't just receipts. They were pieces of a life Daniel had decided didn't matter. She lay back on the bed, stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Who are you, Daniel Hayes?" And somewhere across the city, Nathaniel watched news clips of them together, smiling tightly. "She's starting to see it," he told his associate. "The cracks, the script, the truth." His voice darkened. "Now, we just wait for her to break it open." The video came in the morning. No watermark, no sender, just a flash drive delivered to Clara at reception. "Urgent for Mr. Hayes," it said. She almost didn't hand it to him. Something about the weight of it felt off. But Daniel was already unraveling, and she knew he'd find it one way or another. When he plugged it into his laptop, the first frame made his breath catch. It was Hannah, sitting alone on the rooftop bar, speaking with Nathaniel. The camera angle was elevated, clearly captured through a long lens. Their conversation was silent, but the gestures were clear. Hannah leaning in, Nathaniel handing her a file, her face going pale. The footage was time-stamped, the narrative devastating, his fiancée meeting secretly with his enemy. Daniel sat back, heart cold. This wasn't just betrayal, this was ammunition. Naomi, he thought. She had to be behind the recording, or maybe Nathaniel himself. Either way, it didn't matter. The tape existed. And if it reached the board, the investors or the press, it was over. Not just his company, his credibility, his story, all of it. Clara walked in minutes later. "You need to see this," she said, holding her tablet. "It's trending already." She showed him the social media post. An anonymous account had leaked a blurred still from the video. "Rumors say Daniel Hayes' mystery woman may be working for the enemy," the caption read. Comments exploded. "Fake love story confirmed." So much for loyalty. He didn't call Hannah. He didn't trust himself to speak. He shut the laptop, poured a drink, and stared out the window as if the skyline might offer a solution. Meanwhile, across town, Hannah was reading the same post. Her heart pounded. She recognized the image instantly. Her mind raced. Who had recorded? Them. And more importantly, who had leaked it? She texted Daniel. No reply. She called Clara. Voicemail. Panic bloomed in her chest. She had trusted Nathaniel to be careful. He had promised no cameras, no evidence. But promises meant nothing now, not in this world, not when the truth was always a blade disguised as revelation. An hour later, Clara finally called back. Her voice was tight. "He's not answering anyone," she said, "but the board is calling an emergency session. You need to come, now." Hannah didn't hesitate. She changed, tied her hair back, and called a car. Every block the vehicle passed felt like a countdown. Every second was another layer of guilt pressing against her ribs. When she entered the Solis Tower, all eyes followed her, not with awe, with accusation. The receptionist barely met her gaze. The elevator ride felt like it took years. When the doors opened, Clara was waiting. "They want a statement," she said. "A denial. Anything." "What about Daniel?" "Locked in his office. I don't know what he's thinking." Hannah stepped into the boardroom. 11 men and women stared at her like she was a virus. She didn't wait for introductions. "What you saw was real," she said. "Yes, I met with Nathaniel Hayes. Yes, he gave me information. But I didn't know I was being recorded. I didn't leak anything, and I never betrayed Daniel, not for a second." One of the board members leaned forward. "Then why meet him in secret?" "Because I needed to understand what I was part of," she said. "Because I didn't want to be another pawn in a billionaire's game." Silence, then another voice, softer. "And are you?" Hannah looked down, then up again. "I don't know. But I'm not your enemy. And I'm just someone who wants the truth." The room stayed silent. Outside, the storm gathered. Inside, Clara entered quietly and handed Hannah a phone. "He wants to see you," she whispered. Hannah nodded. She walked through the marble hallway, heels clicking like gunshots. When she entered Daniel's office, he was sitting on the floor, no desk, no drink, just him, alone. He didn't look at her right away. "You lied," he said. She took a step forward. "I didn't tell you, yes, but I didn't lie. I needed to know about Nathaniel, about your past." He finally looked at her. His face was hollow. "And now that you know." She hesitated. "Now I think I know both of you better, and I still choose you." Daniel stood. "They want me out. The board, the investors." "Then fight back," she said. "Tell the truth about everything. And if that truth burns everything down," he asked. She stepped closer. "Then we build something new, from scratch, from honesty." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we do it together." But neither of them knew. The video wasn't the worst of it. Because far away in a quiet townhouse in Prague, Nathaniel was preparing the next move, one that wouldn't just question Daniel's past, but one that would expose the darkest secret he'd buried beneath all the lies. The email was short, no subject, no sender, just a single link and a message. "Before you build a future, Understand the ruins you're building on. Hannah clicked it. A download began, encrypted, heavy. It unpacked into a scanned document, an old internal memo from a subsidiary of Solace, dated 5 years ago. Header, K.H. Blackcase, witness 12. She didn't understand it at first. Then she saw the name Lydia K. Bell, age 25, whistleblower, former trial coordinator. The notes described her as unstable, emotional, but detail-oriented. Then it shifted. Subject alleges Daniel Hayes instructed the suppression of neurological side effect data during the final testing phase. NDA drafted. Relocation arranged. At the bottom, one line circled in red. Patient outcomes include 2 hospitalizations. Status, sealed by executive order. Hannah stared at the screen, breath gone. She read it 3 times. Then again. It didn't make sense. Daniel had always spoken of transparency, of ethics. But this wasn't a lapse. It was an order. A burial. She felt her body go cold. The file ended with a grainy photograph. A woman with haunted eyes, long hair, unsmiling. The resemblance was faint, but Hannah saw it. The same expression she wore in her own reflection when the lies became too loud. She didn't confront him. Immediately. She couldn't. Instead, she printed the document, folded it into her coat, and walked for miles. The wind burned her face, but she didn't stop. When she finally turned back, the sky was bleeding orange and purple. At the Solace building, Clara tried to stop her. "He's in a meeting," she said. "You can't—" But Hannah pushed past. Daniel was alone in the executive suite, staring at a financial dashboard on a massive screen. He turned when she entered. "You shouldn't be here," he said. She dropped the paper on the table between them. "Then you tell me what this is." He didn't need to read it. The way his face paled told her he already knew. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "That doesn't matter," she said. "What matters is whether it's true." Daniel sat down, hard, like the gravity in the room had doubled. "It was 5 years ago," he said. "The study was flawed. The board wanted it fast-tracked. We were launching a joint venture in biotech. I didn't suppress anything. I delayed publication. But she disappeared," Hannah said. "You relocated her." He nodded slowly. "Under pressure, legal threats, death threats. We settled. I didn't want to risk her safety." "And what about the patients?" Hannah asked. "What about their families?" Daniel looked at her then, really looked. "I failed them," he said, "not because I was evil, because I was scared. Scared of losing control, of losing everything my father said I'd never earn." His voice cracked. "And that fear turned me into the man I said I'd never be." She didn't speak, not right away. She sat across from him, her eyes full of a storm that hadn't yet found a place to land. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Because I didn't want you to see this version of me," he said, "the one who chose silence, the one who still flinches at the truth." A pause. "And maybe I didn't want to admit it to myself either. I can't be a part of this if I don't know what I'm standing on," she said. He nodded. "Then I'll show you everything, every sealed file, every buried report. Not because I want your forgiveness, but because I want to stop being afraid." She looked at him, eyes wet. "You can't erase the past, Daniel." "I know," he said, "but I can own it." That night, he did something no CEO of his stature had done before. He called a press conference. No teleprompter, no rehearsed lines. Just him, a microphone, and the truth. He talked about Lydia, about the trial, about the pressure to perform, the cost of fear, the weight of ambition. "We are not the stories we bury," he said. "We are the ones we choose to tell." The press exploded. Critics called it spin. Others called it brave. But to Hannah, watching from backstage, it was something else entirely. It was human, imperfect, dangerous, but real. Later, he found her in the hallway, still wearing the same coat from earlier. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did," he replied, "because you're not my alibi. You're the only person I can't lie to anymore." She stepped into his arms, finally, without fear, and whispered, "Then let's build something we don't have to apologize for." But they both knew, just because the truth was spoken didn't mean the war was over. Because far from the cameras, Naomi sat with a manila envelope in her lap. Inside, court documents, media contacts, and a list of confidential assets tied to Daniel's name. Her voice was low, precise. "If honesty is his weapon," she said, "then let's see how much blood he's willing to spill." The invitations went out the next morning. Elegant cardstock, gold trim, no logos, no digital leak, just old-world class, the kind that whispered exclusivity and power. The event? A private ceremony celebrating integrity and transformation. The location, the Hayes countryside estate, Daniel's retreat untouched by scandal. For insiders, it was a PR redemption move. For Daniel, it was something else entirely, a line in the sand. Hannah wasn't sure about the optics. "People will say it's theatrical," she told him. Daniel smiled softly. "Let them. We've lived the story, now we write the ending." She agreed, reluctantly. But inside, doubt churned. Not about Daniel, but about the ghosts who hadn't stopped hunting them. Naomi, Nathaniel, the board. Everyone had gone quiet, but too quiet. It felt like a storm before the collapse. The estate buzzed with preparation. White tents, string quartets, handwritten place cards, only 24 guests, board members, long-trusted allies, and Clara. The press was not invited. "This isn't a spectacle," Daniel said. "It's a promise." He and Hannah rehearsed. No vows. There would be no priest, no champagne tower. Just a statement, a shared one, a moment of unity in front of the people who mattered most. But Naomi had received the invitation too. No RSVP was needed. Her presence was implied. Expected? No. But feared. Absolutely. And she didn't disappoint. 30 minutes into the ceremony, she arrived. Alone, in white. A color she hadn't worn since her first wedding. Her dress was surgical, tailored, sharp, and unignorable. She walked through the garden like she owned it, and no one dared stop her. Daniel saw her and froze. Hannah turned, just as Naomi reached the central stone aisle, heels clicking against old marble. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice cutting through the music like glass, "but if this is about truth, I thought you'd want everyone to see all of it." She pulled a small remote from her clutch, clicked it. A projector, hidden, until then, flickered to life. The screen displayed silent footage, grainy, intimate, explosive. Daniel and Hannah, in the elevator, on the rooftop, the confessions, the tension, the kiss, the pact. It wasn't just their love. It was their rawest moments, their weakest, their truths. Naomi had found the surveillance files and weaponized vulnerability. The crowd gasped. Some looked away. Others stared, hungry. Daniel stepped forward. "That footage was never meant for public eyes." Naomi smiled coldly. "But it's real, isn't it? So let them see it. Let them see how much of your empire is built on illusion." Hannah didn't flinch. She stepped forward too. "Thank you, Naomi," she said, voice steady. "You just proved this. Us isn't staged." Naomi blinked, thrown off. "This isn't a performance," Hannah continued. "You think showing our doubts will break us, but that's what love is. Imperfect, scared, raw." She turned to you, the crowd. "If any of you still believe that hiding pain makes a leader stronger, then you haven't learned anything from this year." The room shifted. Whispers turned. Naomi stood there, suddenly alone. Daniel looked at her, not with hate, but with finality. "You've lost the narrative," he said, "and you've already lost me." Naomi didn't respond. Her heels turned slowly. Her exit was silent, controlled, but the fury in her spine was volcanic. She didn't scream, she didn't beg. She just vanished down the marble path like a ghost written out of the story. The ceremony continued, but it felt different now. Not celebratory, declarative. Hannah and Daniel didn't exchange vows. They exchanged a single sentence. No more masks. And for everyone watching, it was enough. A quiet applause followed, not the thunder of victory, but the rhythm of release, of letting go. Later, in the stillness of the estate, Hannah stood barefoot by the reflecting pool. Daniel joined her, his jacket slung over one shoulder. "We survived her," he said. "Not just her," Hannah whispered. "Ourselves." He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. They stood there, two people stripped of pretense. But even in the peace, something lingered, because the final piece hadn't moved yet. Far away, in a modest Prague office, Nathaniel watched the footage Naomi had leaked. He replayed Hannah's words, her tone, her loyalty. "They really believe they've won," he muttered. His associate asked, "Do we respond?" Nathaniel shook his head. "No, we wait. There's one more card, and when we play it, love won't be enough to save them." 2 weeks after the Yashi ceremony, the story reached global saturation. Daniel's speech, Naomi's ambush, Hannah's defiant response, it was all dissected. Some called it the collapse of a dynasty. Others called it the rebirth of authenticity in business. Solace. Stock stabilized. New investors called. The board, once rattled, now leaned toward Daniel again. But the peace wasn't real. It was borrowed, and Nathaniel Hayes was ready to collect. It began with a letter from a Swiss bank. A locked file had been accessed using an outdated but verified authorization code belonging to Daniel's father. Inside, a will addendum, signed and notarized, dated 6 months before his death. It named Nathaniel as a rightful heir, and more dangerously, as co-trustee of an offshore fund that had been used to seed Solis's early expansion. The implication: Daniel may have built the castle, but Nathaniel owned part of the foundation. Daniel received the documents on a Tuesday. He read them in silence, the blood draining from his face. Hannah found him in the study, hands clenched on the windowsill. "It's him," he said. "He found it." She didn't need to ask who. "Can he win?" she asked. "No," Daniel said, "but he can fracture everything." He turned to her, eyes heavy. "And if I fight this with spin, I become him." Nathaniel didn't go to court first. He went to the press. In a stunning op-ed he wrote, "This is not about vengeance, it's about history. My name was erased, my blood was buried, but now the truth has roots." Attached were select pages from the addendum, carefully redacted but enough to stir the world. The headline screamed, "Secret son of Hayes dynasty challenges corporate throne." The board called an emergency session. Daniel stood before them not as CEO, but as defendant. "There is no legal merit to Nathaniel's claim," he said. "But if we ignore the optics, we lose the trust we just rebuilt." One member leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we acknowledge him?" Daniel didn't flinch. "I'm suggesting we investigate the foundation ourselves, fully, transparently. And if we owe him something, we pay it. But we do not give him the pen to write our future." Outside, reporters swarmed the gates. Clara managed PR like a war general. But inside, Hannah felt the toll growing. She saw it in Daniel's posture, the way he flinched when his father's name came up, the way he paced at night, whispering old numbers, old dates. "He's not just haunting me," Daniel said one night. "He's rewriting who I thought I was." Hannah sat beside him. "So stop being the man your father raised. Be the man who survived him." He looked at her, tired. And if Nathaniel was the better son all along? Then you still have a choice. He doesn't, she said. You can lead with truth. He only has anger. That week, Daniel made his boldest move yet. He invited Nathaniel to Solis, publicly. If you want a seat, come earn it, he said in an open statement, but you will not steal what you refuse to help build. Nathaniel arrived in tailored grey, smile razor-sharp. Very well, he said. Let's see if your people believe in you more than your paperwork. In private, the brothers faced off. You were given everything, Nathaniel said. Even your mistakes came with golden parachutes. And you were given... Silence, Daniel shot back. A gift you weaponized. Nathaniel leaned in. I'm not here to take your company, Daniel. I'm here to take your identity. Let's see who the world chooses when all the masks fall. That night, Hannah found Daniel staring at his old family photo, the last one before Nathaniel's name was scrubbed. He thinks love is a weakness, Daniel said. Hannah touched his hand. Then let's make it our strength. She stepped closer. You built Solis for your father. Build what's next for yourself. And for the first time, Daniel whispered the thought he hadn't dared say aloud. Then maybe it's time I let go of Solis. Hannah didn't blink. If that's what peace looks like, I'll walk through the fire with you. But even as they spoke those words across the city, Nathaniel clicked send on a final, invile, one last leak, not financial, not legal, personal. A secret even Daniel had buried so deeply he didn't remember telling anyone. And when the world saw it, everything would change, not just who he was, but who Hannah believed he could be. The leak dropped at 6:04 a.m. No headlines, no warning, just a file, an audio recording uploaded anonymously to a forum known for whistleblower data. Within minutes, it was being dissected, time-stamped, and shared across every media platform. Daniel's voice, younger, less guarded. The background was a clinking glass, faint jazz music. A dinner, maybe, but the words, those were undeniable. If it ever gets out, I'm finished. I pushed it. I told them to bury the side effects. I told them to delay the trials. I even promised the lab director a bonus to keep her quiet. You think I regret it? Maybe, but regret doesn't unmake $1 billion. Hannah heard the clip in bed. Her phone vibrated non-stop. The audio played on loop, commentators reacting live, influencers splicing his quote into parody, news anchors demanding resignation. She couldn't breathe. Her body felt like ice, because this wasn't strategic ambiguity. This was confession, plain, irrevocable. At Solis, Daniel arrived before anyone. Clara was already at her desk, pale. It's real, she said. There's no editing. The voice match is clean. We're in free fall. Daniel didn't ask who leaked it. He knew. Nathaniel, the final card, the most personal betrayal. And yet all he could think about was Hannah. She met him at the rooftop garden hours later, where the city could still pretend it hadn't heard. She stood by the railing. Didn't turn when he approached. It's real, she asked. He nodded. I was 28, desperate. Solis was 2 weeks from folding. I thought I was saving everyone. By burying patience. Her voice was sharp. By risking lives for a bonus. Daniel took a slow breath. It wasn't about greed. It was about survival. But that doesn't make it right. She turned. To him, then. You told me everything after Lydia, but not this. This is different. Because I never wanted to believe I said it, he whispered. That version of me, I buried him. She stepped back. You buried the truth, Daniel. And now it's burying us. He reached for her hand. She pulled away. I believed in what we were building, that we could rise from the wreckage, but now I wonder, was this always doomed? Daniel's voice broke. No, you changed everything. You made me honest, brave. Then prove it, she said. Step down, admit everything, not to salvage your legacy, but to save your soul. He stared at her, heart fractured. And what happens to us if I do? Her silence was deafening. Then she said, "That depends on whether you're still pretending you deserve me." That evening, Daniel released a statement. Short, raw, final. I did say it, and it was real. I failed, not just as a leader, but as a human being. I resign effective immediately. Solis deserves better than the version of me who once believed success was worth silence. The media exploded. Stocks fell. But the world didn't end. What rose in its place was something quieter, respected, real. That night, Hannah packed her bag. She didn't leave a note. She didn't need to. Daniel watched from the window as the car pulled away. He didn't try to stop her. He couldn't. Some truths were too heavy to carry as a pair. And across the ocean, Nathaniel watched the fallout unfold. His assistant asked, "Is it done?" He closed the laptop. "No," he said, "it's just beginning." Because in the silence that follows a fall, something always tries to rise. 3 weeks passed. No calls, no texts, no stage photos or strategic leaks. Daniel disappeared from the public eye. Solis appointed an interim CEO. The world moved on, as it always does. Faster than grief, slower than guilt. But for Hannah, time dragged. Every morning felt like unfinished business. Every night like a conversation cut mid-sentence. She rented a quiet apartment on the edge of the city, close enough to hear the skyline breathe, far enough to be invisible. She stopped checking the news, stopped replying to Clara. She didn't cry. That would mean it was over. Instead, she lived inside a question. Was the man I loved the same man who confessed? Or are both true at once? One morning a letter arrived, not an email, not a text, handwritten, the paper rough and torn at the edges. The handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel. If you're reading this, it means I didn't call. I didn't chase, because I couldn't ask you to walk back into a fire I lit. But I need you to know, I remember the elevator, I remember the pact, and I remember that in your silence, I learned more about truth than in all my years of speeches. I've stepped away from everything, not just Solis, but the noise. I'm in Italy, in the countryside where my mother grew up. I found her journal. She wasn't the woman my father said she was. She was better, stronger, like you. If you ever want to find me, there's a chair waiting. The one on the left, under the fig tree. No conditions, no questions, just presence. Hannah stared at the page, folded it once, tucked it into her coat pocket. She didn't book a flight, not immediately. First, she visited Lydia Bell, the woman from the black file. It had taken Clara weeks to find her. She now lived quietly under another name, working at a shelter. Hannah didn't ask for forgiveness on Daniel's behalf. She simply said, "I want to know how you survived." Lydia answered, "By remembering that truth doesn't always save you, but it always frees you." That night, Hannah booked a one-way flight to Florence. No luggage, just a coat and a journal. When she arrived at the vineyard Daniel had described, the air smelled like rosemary and rain. A small house stood at the top of the hill, a single tree in front, and there, under its wide arms, 2 chairs. Only one was filled. Daniel looked older, softer. He didn't stand when she approached, just watched her come closer, with eyes full of disbelief. "You came," he said. She didn't answer at first. She sat beside him, then whispered, "I had to see if the man I loved still existed." "He does," he said, "but he's learning to live without the armor." They sat in silence. The wind moved through the leaves. A fig dropped nearby with a soft thud. Finally, she spoke. "I still don't know what we are." "Then let's find out," he said. "No empire, no contracts, just this." He held out his hand, not as a promise, just as a question. She took it, not as a guarantee, just as a choice. And somewhere, far from headlines and boardrooms, 2 people began again. It wasn't a reconciliation, not right away. There were no dramatic kisses, no sweeping declarations. Just two chairs, a fig tree, and silence that healed more than any speech ever could. Daniel and Hannah didn't rush to name what they were rebuilding, because naming things had always been the beginning of expectations. And that's where their story had cracked before. They spent the first few days walking through the vineyard, barefoot in the soil. Daniel cooked, badly. Hannah laughed more than she had in months. He burned the pasta. She read to him from his mother's journal, the parts he couldn't yet face. They rebuilt slowly, through presence, not performance. News of solace faded. Naomi vanished from the tabloids, rumored to be in Asia, launching a new venture. Nathaniel remained silent. His name briefly floated for a board position before mysteriously withdrawing. Hannah knew he wasn't done. Men like him didn't leave the table until they'd flipped it over, but that was no longer her war. She had chosen something else, something quieter. Daniel began writing. Not press releases or internal memos, letters. Long, handwritten letters he never sent. To his father, to Nathaniel, to himself. Each one ended with a line he borrowed from Hannah's own words. Truth doesn't erase you, it refines you. One evening, under the same fig tree, Hannah said softly, "If we ever go back, I don't want to be your shield." He looked up. "You never were. I want to be your mirror," she continued. "Even when the reflection's ugly." Daniel nodded. "And I'll be yours, even when it breaks me." Fall arrived. The vineyard turned gold. Hannah planted a new row of lavender behind the house. Daniel started sketching designs for a foundation, not for profit, not for optics, but for reparation. One aimed at healing the systems he had once fed. They never defined what they were. Some days they were lovers, other days quiet cohabitants. But through it all, they were something Daniel had never known how to be. Honest, even in failure. Especially in failure. On the anniversary of the ceremony, the day Naomi had tried to tear them apart, Daniel took Hannah's hand and said, "If we had never lied, we might never have met." She smiled. "Then maybe some lies are just crooked paths to something real." "So, what are we now?" he asked. She looked at the vineyard, at the sky, at him. "We're the aftermath," she said. "And maybe the beginning." He kissed her then, not to claim, not to prove, just to exist. Fully. Presently, human. The story didn't end with fireworks or scandals. There was no grand re-entry into the public stage, no sequel announcement, just two people learning that sometimes survival isn't about who wins, it's about who chooses to stop running. And in that stillness, far from the noise, they found the one thing neither of them had ever owned: peace. If you've made it this far, let us know what you thought about the story. Rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe to catch all our upcoming stories.